Arrest warrants. Putin and Trump on the cover. George Soros, one of the first theorists of the New World Order, and his Christian enemies Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin during their meeting when a little peace reigned in the world, knowing the psychotic and demonic theosophical beliefs of the New World Order, infested with fanatical Ashkenazi Zionists of Kazar origins, sometimes without even a drop of ancient and noble Semitic Jewish blood. Deist, atheist and satanist Masons or their partners simply servants of Mammon because they are greedy of money and power. It comes as no surprise that the shady tragedy that began with the bogus Russia Gate dossier culminated on Friday the 17th of March with the news of the arrest warrants. The one already issued for Russian President Vladimir Putin and the looming one for the former American President Donald Trump, facing formal indictment next Tuesday. Let us not forget that Freemasonry was revealed to the world with the birth of the Grand Lodge of London on June 24, 1717 in a double sign of challenge to Christianity and to Judeo-Christian biblical culture. Because that day marks the anniversary of the birth of Saint John the Baptist, later beheaded by Herod Antipas, and because the repetition of the 17th, the day of the beginning of the universal flood, represents the Superman's mad desire to reproduce apocalyptic events. Time equals 400 ms. Greater than therefore the association of Friday, the day of Jesus Christ's death on the cross, and the 17th infuses this occasional recurrence not only with a disturbing aspect in popular superstitions but above all with a special value in satanic rituals. As we have seen in one of our historical investigations, a French shepherdess, as ignorant as she was devoted to the Blessed Virgin Mary, was enough in Lourdes to defeat the dark Masonic plans in the shadow of Napoleon III. But let us return to contemporary chronicles. The profile of the two judicial actions that smell of NWO conspiracy is very different as the caliber of the two characters who share, in their own way, the same Christian faith, and perhaps for this very reason they are in the crosshairs of the Masonic Zionist congregation. The new Tsar of Moscow, a fervent Orthodox, is ready to be killed in order to defend his homeland. The guru of the MAGA, Make American Great Again, a somewhat vicious Catholic, has already demonstrated several times that he does not possess the intelligence and the courage of the Russian and for years has been acting with the fearless battle strategy, "Let's arm ourselves and go," which exploded in the trap of the assault on Capitol Hill. We'll see the details later. Let's start from the historical reconstruction of an alliance between Trump and Putin, which was boycotted in every way precisely because it would have opened global glimmers of lasting peace with the consequent failure of the warlords thanks to whom the Rockefeller and Rothschild dynasties and their representatives rule. Bill Gates and George Soros. Putin and Trump have been targeted by the New World Order since 2016 when the American candidate of the Republicans defeated his Democratic rival Hillary Diane Rodham, wife of Bill Clinton, in the presidential elections. It was an unexpected blow for the former Secretary of State of the Obama-Biden administration. Perhaps she too, because she ruined the plans of global terrorists on the pandemic from laboratory created SARS-CoV-2. In 2016 the SARS chimeric viruses built as bacteriological weapons in a collaboration between China and the USA, with the initial EU hand, were already ready in the centenary of the also suspected Spanish flu of 1917, which brought Russia to its knees. Would have been a perfect opportunity to honor the evil cabal, but Trump won. Then the Democrats reacted with the conspiracy theory which, when it comes from the left heart of the NWO, is always founded a priori. First, it is no coincidence that in 2018, when Trump was already governing, a disturbing research on SARS by Anthony Fauci, the scientist who coordinated almost all the most dangerous bacteriological research in American military and civilian biological laboratories, was rejected by the DARPA agency of the Department of Defense which, however, in the same year financed the mysterious project on dangerous pathogens of the Purbright Institute in the United Kingdom, together with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, sponsor of the experiments conducted by the Wuhan Institute of Virology through the NGO Eco Health Alliance and by Moderna with the help from the Pentagon. At the origins there was the Russia Gate. Russiagate's casus belli was the whodunit of Clinton's embarrassing emails about sensitive national security information. In July 2016, however, the FBI concluded the investigation by declaring that it was extremely careless in handling confidential information, but the director of the agency, James Comey, believed that there was no reason to proceed. Obvious. Obama still governed, but in October the same official wrote to Congress that other emails had been found, relevant to the previous investigation considered closed. Previously WikiLeaks of Julian Paul Assange, born Julian Paul Hawkins, had published an avalanche of confidential documents. These were not stolen messages but PDFs that the State Department itself made available following a request. Under the Freedom of Information Act. On October 11, 2016, however, a few weeks before the elections, the account of Hillary Clinton's campaign leader, John Podesta, was hacked. WikiLeaks publishes emails. Podesta accuses the Russian government and Donald Trump, the Republican candidate, was elected president and assumed office in January 2017. In May, the Russiagate scandal broke out over alleged Kremlin interference in the elections. The allegations are based on the June 2016 meeting in New York's Trump Tower between the presidential candidate, his staff and a Russian lawyer suspected of being close to the Russian government. The Dems tried to initiate impeachment proceedings, but did not have sufficient numbers in the House of Representatives to pass it. Then comes the Steele dossier, which takes its name from the British secret agent Christopher and according to multiple indications was piloted by Hillary Clinton, which collects the information of the Russian analyst Igor Danchenko including the gossip of a Trump night in Moscow with some prostitutes. In March 2019, the U.S. Attorney General, William Barr, communicated to the American Congress that there is no evidence relating to the alleged collusion or conspiracy between Donald Trump, U.S. President and the Moscow government, for false statements. To the FBI, Danchenko was arrested by the Justice Department in November 2021 but then acquitted by a judge in October 2022. No one guilty on one side or the other. The Ukraine Gate triggered by Zelensky, it was just a colossal political plot to undermine the cooperation between Putin and Trump in view of the war in Ukraine. This was prepared by NATO, as confirmed by the CEPA dossier published exclusively by Gospa News, with continuous provocations after the 2014 bloody coup in Kiev financed by George Soros, the USA and other countries of the Atlantic Alliance which brought down the pro-Russian government. Time equals 400 ms. Greater than thus began in Donbass the civil war, which became an international conflict in 2022. Precisely Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky denounced pressure from the Trump administration to reopen the investigations, quickly closed, on Hunter Biden, son of the at-time Vice President Joseph, when he was well paid as a member of the board of directors of the Ukrainian energy company Burisma which held licenses to extract gas and oil in Donbass. The case became known as Ukraine Gate and had a double development. On the one hand it induced counter-information newspapers such as Gospa News to delve into the shameful political and private collusions between the Bidens and the Kiev government. On the other it allowed the Democrats to start an impeachment procedure which was then closed by the Senate before the formal indictment in January 2020. Journalistic investigations had not yet emerged at the time on the role of the Bidens, through Metabiota, also with regard to the bacteriological laboratories opened in Ukraine by the Pentagon, during the Obama administration by the former director of the CIA, which, thanks to funding from the agency USAID government developed a research on COVID-19 3 months before the pathology of SARS-CoV-2 was discovered and so named. This long premise allows us to get to the present day and understand how Russiagate and Ukraine Gate were two well-structured conspiracies with the help of U.S. intelligence which saw from 2013 to 2015 the deputy director of the Central Intelligence Agency, the expert of bacteriological weapons Avril Haines, promoted to Deputy National Security Advisor in 2015 until the end of the Obama-Biden administration mandate and then appointed by the current U.S. President as Director of National Intelligence, DNI, i.e. at the helm of all 17 agencies' U.S. feds. Haines was twice a pandemic prophetess, first at a 2018 conference in Camden and then during the suspected October 2019 event 201 coronavirus drill funded by the Gates Foundation and the World Economic Forum. Time equals 400 ms. Greater than. Despite this, Gospa News, together with the American sites Veterans Today and the Intel Drop, has so far been the only online newspaper in the world to highlight the suspicious implications of the director of the U.S. intelligence community with the pandemic, including her curious trip to Italy in 2017 in Siena, where there are the headquarters of London Big Pharma GSK, controlled by Gates and financed by Fauci for some research on vaccines, is based. Warranty for Putin's arrest. Jihadist general's trial stopped. This is the background in which war broke out in Ukraine after one too many provocations by the Kiev army in Donbass. And although Putin has so far used the utmost caution in trying to spare civilian casualties by limiting the use of deadly hypersonic missiles and old rockets of poor accuracy, therefore capable of causing enormous collateral damage, he found himself accused of war crimes, as we had already predicted in April 2022, carrying out an investigation into the Atlanticist political matrix that animates the activity of the International Criminal Court, ICC, in The Hague. Indeed, we have to do much, let's say, for the development of land forces. But back then, in 2014, there were no hypersonic weapons, though they exist now. Yes, we do not use them in fact, but we have them. Do you understand? There are other cutting-edge systems as well, though in 2014, there was nothing of the kind, said the Russian president in an interview for the program, Moscow. Kremlin. Putin, on the Rossiya 1 TV channel, posted by journalist Pavel Zarubin on his Telegram channel on Sunday. Out of a pleasant curiosity, his speech on this topic took place the day after the publication of our investigation into the Kremlin's arsenal, in which we highlighted similar concepts. Putin has been targeted by an action that appears ridiculous for three main reasons. Primarily because this institution has not yet been able to convict the Bosnian general commander of the 5th Army Corps, who personally led a battalion of jihadists shouting, Allahu Akbar, and was arrested in 2018 for war crimes deriving from the massacres carried out on the camp together with the al-Qaeda militiamen, that was sent to Bosnia by the Saudis and the CIA. As narrated in the book by a former Interpol official, Europe's Caliphate, the Jihad Armed by Saudis and CIA. Interpol officer's book. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than Dudakovic and his officers are suspected of the killings of 250 ethnic Serb civilians and prisoners of war in the fall of 1995 when they forced the retreat of Serbian forces, and also of Muslims, in 1994 after defeating the forces of Fikret Abdic, who had proclaimed the autonomy of that area from Sarajevo. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than the general, before being indicted by the ICC, became one of the heads of the NATO mission in Kosovo called SFOR, and unfortunately in one of the meetings he poses right in front of the Italian flag. Arrested in 2018, he was released 3 days later. His trial was not rooted in the Hague Tribunal but in Sarajevo, where many Bosnian nationalists consider him a hero. It started in 2019 but has evaporated into thin air in the news since 2020 due to the start of the pandemic. The other reasons why the ICC arrest warrant is really just a geopolitical smear move stems from the fact that neither Russia nor the US recognizes such a judging body. So the triumphant tones with which President Joseph Biden commented on the news by saying that the arrest is justified because it is clear that he committed war crimes are the last act of a tragicomic farce. The Russian president responded to it by making a sudden trip to Crimea and Donbass. In fact, he went to see in person the reconstruction projects of the city of Mariupol, liberated from the Ukrainian neo-Nazi paramilitaries of the Azov Battalion, who were denounced for war crimes and human rights violations in the Donbass civil war by Amnesty International to the UN and the International Criminal Court to no avail. The security plan for Trump's indictment. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than Trump's case is more complex because it is based on a concrete judicial investigation that has been going on for months and which represents one of the many streams of the Russia-Gate and Ukraine-Gate investigations through which the life of the then American president was sieved, looking for some skeletons in the closet. New York federal, state and local law enforcement agencies are preparing for the possibility of former President Donald Trump facing criminal charges as early as next week in connection with a cash payment to a porn star, WNBC reported Friday. Wrote CNBC News when the bombshell was dropped on the media mainly close to the Dems on Friday the 17th of March. Time equals 400 Ms. greater than UK Raingate. CIA deep state's plot against Trump with two whistleblowers and Italian ties. The interagency discussions included potential security deals around the state criminal court in Lower Manhattan, where a grand jury heard testimony related to the 2016 payment to Stormy Daniels, according to the report, which cited 5 senior officials. If he were indicted, Trump, the 2024 Republican presidential candidate, would become the first former president ever to face criminal charges. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office is investigating Trump over his firm's classification of a $130,000 refund to his former personal attorney Michael Cohen for a payment allegedly made to the pornographic film actress. From his social network Truth, Donny thundered fiery words pointing his finger at a plot by the Hungarian-American Plutarch, a neologism for those who govern thanks to wealth, George Soros, and now. We are a nation in steep decline, being led into WW3 by a crooked politician who doesn't even know he's alive, but who is surrounded by evil and sinister people. Can only hate our now failing USA. We just can't allow this anymore. They're killing our nation as we sit back and watch. We must save America. Protest, 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 wrote in the first post, then added in the second. Now illegal leaks from a corrupt and highly political Manhattan District Attorney's Office, which has allowed new records to be set in violent crime and whose leader is funded by George Soros, indicate that, with no crime being able to be proven, and based on an old and fully debunked, by numerous other prosecutors, fairy tale, the far and away leading Republican candidate and former President of the United States of America, will be arrested on Tuesday of next week. Protest, take our nation back. The advances of the American media were actually as suspicious and shameful as the well-known sponsorships given by Soros to the district attorney in Manhattan that we wrote about a few months ago. Time equals 400 ms, greater than the weakness of the former Republican president with no woe. But if Trump is in the middle of this conspiracy, he also has himself to blame for the lack of intelligence, determination and courage. When he was in the White House on 3 occasions, he had the excuse to carry out an energetic intervention against the men of the deep state or New World Order who with a slow work today brought him to the judicial gridiron. The first occurred at well-organized protests in Minneapolis by the Soros-funded Black Lives Matter following the suspicious killing of convicted George Floyd by a police officer. Time equals 400 ms, greater than he asked Defense Secretary Mark Esper to send the army to quell the riots that were setting fire to the city, but the head of the Pentagon refused. Trump, instead of removing him and directing the operation himself, having the title, received the negative response and removed him from office only a few months later. The second episode occurred when, in the midst of the SARS-CoV-2 pandemic, he consciously defined Anthony Fauci, White House emergency consultant for the COVID-19 emergency, a man of the deep state, but did not remove him and did not try to deepen the theory of the constructed virus in the laboratory, as was denounced by the lawyer Francis Boyle, drafter of the national legislation of the United States to implement the Convention on Biological Weapons, Coronavirus 1. Its bioweapon. US expert blames China but forgets 25 Pentagon secret labs for ethnic attacks. On the 4th of February 2020, Gospa News reported his hypothesis in the first investigation into the coronavirus. Time equals 400 ms, greater than why Trump preferred not to get his hands on this vermin he had smelled by suspending funding to EcoHealth Alliance, partner of the Wuhan Institute of Virology, of the Obama-Biden administration's PREDICT project in September 2019, with which USAID carried out the experiments on SARS. Finally, the last occasion was in November 2020, when the clamor of electoral fraud could have justified the imposition of a martial law that would certainly have led the USA to a dramatic civil confrontation, but would have saved them from the subsequent drift with which the new President Biden has delivered the country into the hands of the big pharma of the COVID vaccines and the weapons lobby for the war in Ukraine. Trump's naivety becomes even more sensational when he is overjoyed about being readmitted to Facebook and YouTube. How can he fail to understand that it is the New World Order to allow him to summon street rallies against his arrest, in which eventual infiltrators who are experts in urban warfare such as Antifa or special intelligence departments will be able to cause new violent events such as in the Capitol Hill in order to rain heavy new accusations on him? Newsweek exclusive Jan. 6. Secret commandos with shoot-to-kill authority were at the Capitol. The former U.S. President has too much more linear paths ahead of him if he wants to avoid accusations of instigating terrorism against national security, get himself arrested, accept the consequences as a martyr of justice and propose his presidential candidacy even under trial. Or take a step back, give his official endorsement to Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, already ahead in the polls, and obtained clemency from Justice and the NWO who just want to get rid of his cumbersome political presence. Poll reveals Republicans' preferences for 2024 race. DeSantis over Trump, who is running to a huge defeat. Weapons lobby 5. NWO's warfare plan. Against Russia and counter-information. CEPA project from Washington with NATO, EU and defense corporations. $1 million windshield between politicians, big pharma and weapons lobby. The shady Western system in 30 lines. Wuhan Gate 7. Bioweapons dossier. Pentagon and Fauci 28 use labs. Secrets. Dangerous tests with coronavirus.